Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name is Dewey Vieira. I am with SilencerCo. I'm the Director of Sales Operations. I've been with the company for 6 years now. To my right is Josh Graham. We love to call Beaver. Beaver, introduce yourself.
I work in R&D. I've been with the company for 8 years now, and I'm the R&D testing technician.
So today, we're here to talk to you about cleaning suppressors. It's a question that we here at SilencerCo get a lot. It's a question that is pretty widespread across the entire suppressor industry, and we want to sit here and try to address that regarding our product line and generally speaking as far as suppressors go across all suppressors, whether you're talking about rimfire, centerfire pistol, and just as importantly accessories. Because me personally, I am not that guy that likes to clean stuff. I generally am pretty lazy in that regard. I actually really am very happy to have Beaver here because he's our resident expert on that, being one of the individuals responsible for actually maintaining most of the firearms that we have here in-house, as well as all of our suppressors in inventory as well. So he's our guru when it comes to maintenance and that sort of thing. So today we want to talk about that in detail. We're going to go into a few things, different cleaning methods, different things to look at when cleaning, and of course some of the requirements you should consider when cleaning your suppressors. So with that being said, let's start talking about cleaning in general. Before I really get into detail here with Beaver, one of the things I'd really like to emphasize is that when cleaning a suppressor or accessories associated with the suppressors that you own, make sure you consult with the manufacturer's warranty book and its instructional guide, because the manufacturer's recommended cleaning intervals and methods are really what you should be using as a baseline to start with to begin with. With that being said, let's start looking at some of the different things to consider when cleaning. First off, I generally will look at what it is that I'm cleaning, whether it's a rimfire can or a centerfire pistol or a centerfire long gun can. So what are your thoughts on that, Beaver?
Yeah, so the differences you'll actually find with centerfire and versus the rimfire is rimfire, you shoot more lead cast bullets. You do have some shooters out there that are shooting cast bullets out of 9mm, but it's not as common. So you'll find more lead deposits versus carbon in the rimfire cans. And with the centerfire pistol cans, you're getting a lot of carbon and some copper fouling.
Yep, you're right. And from my experience, even in the centerfire arena, depending on the ammunition that you're running, it could be, and this is primarily in the 300 blackout arena or subsonic ammunition generally, what I find is that ammunition does run fairly dirty, and you tend to find a lot of accumulation of filler, primarily in the blast chamber and ahead of the blast baffle. But with that being said, let's kind of talk a little bit about different materials and things to consider when you start looking at suppressors, because by and large, suppressors are going to be manufactured out of generally five different materials. You've got aluminum, stainless steel, cobalt-6, Inconel, and titanium. So what are some things to consider when you start looking at those 5 key materials there?
So depending on cleaning method, you'll usually want to stick to the ultrasonic and the dip with the tougher materials like steel. Aluminum tends to pit inside of both of those solutions. One of the things that we're actually finding is much easier now is soda blasting. Soda blasting is a really fine media that won't actually affect the finish of the anodize or the oxidize.
Right.
So it's actually very quick and very easy to clean off all that carbon residue. And then as far as the octanes or any centerfire can, right, you're good on most of them have a steel baffle, but they have an aluminum tube. So once again, you have to keep in mind what you're cleaning. Make sure that the right material goes into the right solution.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And what's kind of neat here is, the octane, this guy is coming out of our inventory in-house, out of R&D. This Sparrow and that Switchback, and both of these cans are broken down. Disregard these accessories here in the center. these come out of my personal demo kit. So generally when I'm out on the road and I'm doing live fires with dealers, customers, certain law enforcement professionals, we tend to demo these guys quite a bit. And I can tell you that I haven't cleaned any of these guys in over 2 years. So that switchback, I can't tell you how many thousands of rounds are through that. The Sparrow actually also has several thousand rounds through it. And I don't know whether or not you guys can see this in the camera. So I'm gonna pull out the Sparrow core here first. If you look at that, and that's, conservatively, I could say that's probably about 3,000 rounds of not really lead, but more what looks like carbon residue there on the monocore. And then you're also gonna see quite a bit of accumulation in terms of carbon on the split tube here. So again, that's about potentially close to 4,000 rounds of continuous fire or constant fire over the course of 3 years. But every suppressor is going to be different based on its design. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that I kind of highlighted my switchback here. This is one of 2 switchbacks that I run. And the baffle design here is different. The Sparrow utilizes a monocore. The switchback actually is comprised of stacked baffles. So this is one baffle section comprised of 2 baffles and the blast baffle as well. And you can see that carbon and lead buildup there. Probably same number of rounds that have been through that. And our recommended cleaning interval for the Sparrow is 1,500 to 2,000 rounds. So that's not too bad considering what I've put through that. The switchback is right around 1,500 as well. And I'm well past that, but as you can see, because of the way that suppressor is designed, you'll see a little bit more accumulation. It's not to say that that's a bad thing, it's just a different design as a whole. Stainless steel baffles and split tubes, so very easy to clean as well, regardless of what cleaning methodology you use. Yeah. Now, when you start looking at like our Gen 1 octane here, there's obviously the tube that you'd mentioned earlier. Another stacked baffle design, what we call in-house a click-together assembly. So that's commonly found in our octane series, the switchback, even our Warlock, and a discontinued product that we no longer manufacture, the Spectre 2, all utilize a stacked click-together assembly baffle like that. So you could see the carbon residue here. This has actually got a fair amount of fire through it. As a matter of fact, this is sales 5, so this is one of my demo cans from like 6 years ago. So you'll see what kind of residue buildup you'll see on these. Now, we're highlighting these here. You got rimfire, centerfire, pistol. One of the things that people tend to forget a lot about, and this is why I bring these up here, is accessories. So you could see these accessories, they're muzzle devices, flash hider or ASR flash hider or ASR standard 3-port muzzle brake, and this is an Alpha direct thread mount. Beaver, let's talk about how much of a disaster those guys are.
Yeah, they've been through quite a bit of testing, and with some of the higher pressure rounds, especially with reloading, we've actually found that some powders will burn differently, so they'll deposit differently between various different calibers and barrel lengths and everything. So depending on what you're running, you'll see difference in carbon buildup and copper fouling, and that copper fouling also is the discoloration that you'll see. A lot of muzzle devices will actually start to turn a hue of blue.
Get a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, and it's nothing really to be too concerned about. But I would definitely stress cleaning. You don't want too much carbon buildup getting onto your muzzle device, mainly because you don't want it breaking loose, creating an obstruction or anything like that. Right. So, and
that's such an important part, and I think it's one of those things that a lot of people disregard pretty commonly. It's important to make sure that your muzzle device is free and clear of any debris, because that is going to be your source of engagement with your actual mount, your QD mount. Every manufacturer is different. We utilize the ASR QD mount, both the Bravo and Charlie, and these are, our ASR muzzle devices which interface with that. And as you can see, you've got a coarse thread with your taper. If either one of those aspects of those muzzle devices are fouled, you're not going to get a positive engagement with the ASR mount, which is going to prevent it from actually really maintaining any positive contact and locking in properly. With that being said, with the Alpha direct thread mount here, I mean, look at that, man. That's insane. So again, with fouling, whether it's carbon buildup, any residue as a result of shavings from a cartridge or whatnot, that's actually going to interfere with your coarse thread here and could prevent positive engagement and or what possible.
Yeah, you can get your muzzle device to stick to your can, but that's mainly due to not maintaining your muzzle device. Right. If you are keeping track of it and you don't leave your can on for 2 years and you just keep shooting it, it's gonna build that carbon up and it's gonna lock.
So for you guys out there that are really pretty meticulous about cleaning your firearms, don't disregard the muzzle of your firearm. Make sure you take the time to make sure that that's free and clear of any debris as well. With that being said, let's talk about and show these guys some different methods of cleaning stuff. We've got 3 that we can talk about, more or less, I guess 3 you could say. We've got an ultrasonic cleaner. We have the ability to get you guys access to a soda blast medium. And we also have a tumbler where we can run that wet and or dry. Really, I guess technically 4, right? Yeah. So we're gonna show you guys what that looks like and what kind of results you'll get out of using any one of those methods here in a couple seconds. Okay, so here in front of us, we've got 3 different cleaning methods, but here to my left, we have an ultrasonic cleaner, and we've got our wet tumbler right here, and then we've got our dry. So we're using steel media and walnut media in the tumbler. So Beaver, let's see what we can do to get some things cleaning. And we'll start with the ultrasonic cleaner. How about that? All right, so we got an ultrasonic cleaner over here. We got a couple cans and a muzzle device. We're gonna get to work on cleaning these guys. The reason why we actually have highlighted these 2 cans is because one should be cleaned in an ultrasonic cleaner, the other one should not.
Well, with the solution that we have is purple power. It's 50-50 of the purple power and water. And we found that with purple power and the ultrasonic, the aluminum will start to pit. So it'll ruin your finish, and when you're throwing your can in, you want that thing to last as long as possible, and this will ruin that. Yeah.
So this guy here, the aluminum suppressor that we're talking about, is an actual Warlock. So this is one of the first runs, just based on the logo here. So we're gonna throw that Warlock in the ultrasonic cleaner here so you could see what the end result's gonna be. And then obviously our Sparrow is a stainless steel suppressor. I mean, outer tube, split tube, and monocore, all stainless steel, so there shouldn't be any damage done there. And that fouled up muzzle device is going to get thrown in there too. So we'll see how those guys turn out. So the Sparrow, pretty easy to break down. Back cap, you got your monocore with split tube. It's actually one of my favorites, especially for first-time suppressor owners who want a rimfire can, primarily because of its ease of maintenance and use. So as you can see, 5 individual components there, breaks down really easily. The Warlock we reintroduced this year, it is an aluminum can, 22 long rifle only, 3 ounces in overall weight. So it's really popular for those guys and a low cost alternative for guys who don't want to spend a whole lot of money on a simple rimfire suppressor. Of course, in terms of cleaning, it's also pretty easy to clean. It's just a little bit more complex in that there's more moving parts, so to speak. So just throw this guy in there and watch some magic happen. One thing to consider when using an ultrasonic cleaner, and we'll mention this probably a couple times, is because of the chemicals utilized when using an ultrasonic cleaner, you really need to check with your local ordinances, whether it's city, state, in order to properly dispose of the remnants of the cleaning solution. because it is a hazmat material, and we don't want you guys getting fined for disposing of stuff in an improper method, all right? So
every time you also clean, it's a good time to actually check the O-rings, and you'll actually notice that some of them have damage, and that just shows that it's a good time to replace it.
So O-rings are removed, and we're getting ready to throw these guys in there. So this particular ultrasonic cleaner, I mean, it runs on 30-minute intervals, right? So over the course of several iterations here of 30 minutes, you guys have seen how dirty these cans were. You've also seen how, I mean, serviceable the Warlock was without any external damage pitting caused by this. So when we pull these guys out here in a short period of time, you'll be able to see the differences. So let's go ahead and drop that guy in there and let it get to work. And we'll move on to the next cleaning method while this guy is working overtime to get that stuff looking pretty good. So we were talking about the ultrasonic cleaner. We're going to take a look at the wet tumbler now. We actually have steel media in here. So we've got a couple different cans we're going to throw in here. We've got a Switchback 22, which has got a titanium series of tubes and stainless steel baffles, and then a first gen octane 9mm here. And are you going to throw the muzzle device in there too?
Yep.
So we're going to disassemble these guys, throw them in our wet tumbler here using steel media, and then here in a few minutes we'll be able to take a look at the differences. As we disassemble these guys, you know, we showcased how dirty these guys were before, so pay close attention to some of these guys because as you can see, there's carbon coming out of these cans as we speak. So they're noticeably dirty. So you'll be able to see the difference between dirty cans, whether it's rimfire or centerfire pistol, and clean cans using a wet tumbler here. So let's go ahead and break these guys down real quick. And outside of the steel media, what else do we have in here for?
We're gonna, it's mostly water, and then we're gonna give it a good squeeze of Dawn dish soap.
Okay. Dawn dish soap. And how long do guys typically have to, or should they expect?
I would check it every hour, just to make sure that it's actually getting cleaned.
Doing what it's supposed to do? Gotcha. So this switchback here, I think I mentioned earlier, probably has, you know, roughly 4,000 rounds, 4,000 rounds through it. And you can see some of that lead buildup and carbon residue. I mean, it literally has come off as we broke this can down, and it's accumulated onto the table here. So that guy, that baffle right there is the most telling. So guys who are really cognizant of how clean things should be, they will lose their minds when they see how much better it'll look after. All right, let's toss that stuff in there. Do you expect any damage done to the outer tube on that?
We're gonna find out.
Yeah. Just toss all that stuff in there, right? I'm a little bit of a caveman. I lack a lot of finesse, so so how much does one of these things go for? If I wanted to go to Harbor Freight and buy one made in China.
But you could find one for under 50 bucks.
And this is more or less environmentally friendly too for those that care about that sort of thing, right? It's just dishwashing soap and steel.
Yeah. So
city ordinances, you know, environmental ordinances, that sort of concern, not so much an issue here with these guys.
Yes. So once again, that goes back to the type of suppressor. I wouldn't be as concerned. Carbon's going to be the main culprit on your pistol cans. Mm-hmm. Rimfire will have lead.
There it is. So it's just going to rotate like this for how long now?
I'd check it every hour.
So we just showed you how the wet tumbler works. This is a dry tumbler. You guys who reload regularly and are cleaning brass, you guys are already familiar with both media. This guy is actually using a walnut media, which is obviously dry. We've got an old school octane here, which we're gonna break down, piston, and this pretty messed up flash hider here. So we're gonna throw it in here and see how it all works. It should be pretty interesting because we've actually never used this type of media to clean anything outside of brass before. So this can here, this Gen 1 octane, it's an octane 9. 6 years old now, so it's seen some use, that's for sure. Whoa! Dude, that's pretty awesome,
that's
actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crunchy right there. So needless to say, this can has seen a lot of love. So for you guys who have ever wondered, you know, how much wear and tear an octane can take, this is part of your answer right here. So those of you guys familiar with the octane family know that you've got your piston housing, which is built into the can, and then there's an expansion chamber followed by your baffles here. This guy has seen so much use, we're gonna have to figure out how to get the expansion chamber unstuck from all the carbon residue that's in there. Beaver, if you had a guess, how many rounds would you think have been run through this can based on its current status?
My guess would be roughly 2,500 rounds, 3,000 rounds without any cleaning.
Pop loose, there it is. Let's toss that in there, and I'm kind of curious to see what kind of results we get. So the way this dry tumbler operates is essentially you've got your fouled up components placed in the media here, and this media based, you know, with using the vibration friction of this walnut media against that, it should really break down all that buildup that you've seen on the individual baffles, outer tubes and whatnot, and help clean those up. So when we turn this on, this thing is going to vibrate and force that vibration to interface with this. The components you've thrown in there should end up being pretty clean. So let's turn this guy on and you guys will see how it works. Next up, this is probably the most labor-intensive, tedious, and time-consuming method, but this is literally just the wire brush, like cleaning by hand way that you can do things. So we're just going to pull a couple baffles out of each one of these cans. Obviously, you know, a lubricant or a cleaning agent like CLP could be used with any standard wire brush in order to remove surface carbon and lead buildup from any of these baffles. Unfortunately, Beaver's here, so he's going to be the one who cleans. I kind of wish he were at home so he could do this for all my stuff, because I'm not going to do this either. There you go.
I mean, this is a standard cleaning brush you can get from Brownells, and we've got hops number 9, just because it smells great. But it's pretty great at cleaning off that carbon.
Yeah, that's right. I actually do end up using like a flathead screwdriver because I end up losing all my picks. So a flathead screwdriver really gets some of that gnarly stuff off baffles pretty nicely. You know, by and large, we just spent roughly, what would you say, 5-10 minutes cleaning just these two baffles right here. And that is basically a pretty cursory, I mean, endpoint, wouldn't you say? I mean, I don't think you're completely satisfied as far as...
It'll take you a long time if you want to get everything off. And that's where some of the other stuff that we found out where it kills it in time and actually getting everything off.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we've got an ultrasonic cleaner going, we've got a wet tumbler, we've got a dry tumbler, and you just spent, the better part of the last 10, 15 minutes just cleaning these last two baffles. You could safely assume that ideally you'd want to use multiple in order to make sure you got everything, clean to an ideal standard.
Well, and another thing to note is the mess. I mean, wherever you're cleaning, if you're sitting down and watching a show, I mean, you're getting this all over your bench, your chairs, everything.
The kitchen,
yeah. Wherever you're cleaning, it's making a mess.
Next thing we're going to take a look at, we're actually going to have to take a little bit of a walk so we can get downstairs and run which two media were you going to be talking
We've
about?
got the soda blasting cabinet, and then we're going to do the infamous dip.
All right, so this is kind of awesome because we've already covered like all the almost not interesting stuff like the ultrasonic cleaner, the wet and dry tumbler, and then just wire brush cleaning stuff. So now we're gonna do something that's so cool because it's so improper. I'm really excited to do this because I've actually never done this before. So we're actually gonna do what here, Beaver? We're working with vinegar, hydrogen peroxide, and dirty lead-fouled stuff to create something toxic that we really shouldn't be doing, but we're gonna do it anyway.
And another thing to note is, once again, it turns into an acid once you introduce the lead into it. So always be careful and dispose of it properly, not down the drain. And with that also in mind, with all of your mainly carbon covered parts, I wouldn't expect as good a results as with lead-filled parts.
So this is essentially a dip type solution. So like I said, not ideal for home use. Maybe not the safest thing for you guys to do at home either, but I'm excited. So
yeah, so we've got a solution of 50-50, white vinegar and hydrogen peroxide.
a lot of folks will use this more or less and they'll just drop the entire outer tube. So if they're really like outside of just pitting, but more concerned about like the finish, you can kiss that SilencerCo finish goodbye too. Yeah. So it's a warning that I tend to have to repeat a lot, to be honest with you. And at the same token, you'd be surprised how many folks will use an ultrasonic cleaner more often than not. Yeah. A lot of folks actually own one. So, but I do hear about this a lot. I've just never done it myself.
So we'll start with the stainless steel parts, and we'll just take a few of these so that we can save the rest for the soda blast.
And these are dirty enough again where, you know, we're seeing carbon pop off.
Carbon. And you don't really want to splash it.
Now, what kind of period of time would you expect to have to let these, you know?
Once again, I mean, I would check it every hour if you can, and you can actually see how that solution is starting to bubble. And we'll throw one of these.
That's gonna happen. That's gonna be interesting. So that's stainless steel.
So that's stainless steel. Then we'll take a Warlock and we'll disassemble it and just throw the whole thing into it.
Because this is aluminum tube, aluminum baffles. Obviously, you know, has a finish on it. It's a warning I tend to have to give folks quite often, just to make sure that they understand that they do this at home, you can kiss your finish goodbye. And I don't know if you guys noticed at home, recorded the serial number because it's more than likely not going to be present anymore after this. And for compliance reasons, we got to make sure that's taken care of.
All right, this is the big no-no. Aluminum tube and baffles into the dip.
that's actually pretty strong.
So that one you can actually see the lead in action. It'll once it all turns to acid, it actually loses its action, and you'll start to see a base of lead at the bottom of the jar.
We've got one more method that you can think about utilizing in terms of cleaning suppressors, suppressor components, suppressor accessories, and that is soda blast right here. So we're gonna give this guy a run. This is supposed to be pretty cool. I've actually haven't seen this done yet either, so stay tuned. We're gonna get on this right now. We've gone through quite a few cleaning methods here. This is the last one we'd like to showcase for you guys. And this is actually not quite as complicated as you would imagine. This is just a blast cabinet. It's hooked up to an air compressor. So we've got an air compressor line here, shop vac right below it. Believe it or not, you can pick one of these blast cabinets up relatively inexpensively. There's a media in there which you use to blast away carbon residue and lead fouling and whatnot. And we use this, well, I mean, Beaver here uses it fairly routinely. So Beaver, if you want to talk about this, and yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool.
So it's filled with soda media, basically baking powder, super fine grit, and it's nice because with the pressure of the air and how fine the media is, you're not actually affecting any of your anodized or oxidized. So it's just cutting that carbon off of the part, and we'll crank it up and get going. All right, it's gonna start smelling like baking soda. Yeah, so basically I'm just trying to stir up the media, make sure that I get a good flow of the media through the air that'll actually start blasting the part.
So we just finished running our ultrasonic cleaner. We ran this for 30 minutes, and we're gonna go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the Sparrow components out first. So there is the Sparrow outer tube. Oops. Our split tubes as well. If you want both of those. And then last but not least, the actual monocore. So it's interesting to note, as I'm pulling these out, there's some residue on these. The residue is more than likely remnants of what came off of the Warlock that was also in the vat with it. And an interesting observation we can make right now is, yes, this did a really good job of cleaning quite a bit of the lead and carbon residue that was actually on the split tube and even the monocore here. But as is usually the case based on what we've seen so far, it's not the one size fits all cleaning method or the surefire way of cleaning things by themselves. So you'll probably end up still having to apply some elbow grease to it and using a wire brush and whatnot, maybe some CLP or hops or whatever your cleaning solution is, in addition to the results that we're seeing with the ultrasonic cleaner here. And that's specific to this Sparrow in general, based on what we're seeing. But by and large, the results are pretty good. The outer tube there does look to be a little bit of wear on that finish. And keep in mind, again, we did leave it in there for only 30 minutes. So I would probably say I wouldn't want to leave the tube in there for another 30-minute session or more before it starts to really damage that Cerakote finish on that. Now let's take a look at the Warlock. So I'm going to start with the tube here because this is kind of interesting. Finish obviously been kind of destroyed, but more importantly, I think once we get this guy wiped down, you'll see the serialized aspect, the actual engraving on the serial number, may not be 100% legible. So at that point, you're not just concerned about just your finish being ruined, on this suppressor, but you're also essentially making that non-compliant according to ATF regulations because you can no longer read the serial number on that. Let's just go ahead and pull the rest of these components out of here. I didn't give you that back cap to the Sparrow, but there are your baffles on the Warlock, front cap and back cap. So covered in residue again from the ultrasonic cleaner there. Pretty easy to wipe down with a coat of hops or whatnot. The main thing to be concerned with there is that outer tube because it's pretty much a train wreck at this point. And as you're kind of scrubbing those down, you can, does it feel like the texture has changed at all?
It's gritty. So it's definitely started to pit into the anodize, and you can actually see in some areas where the anodize is coming completely off, much like the tube.
So again, keep in mind the Warlock is an all aluminum suppressor. Anytime you're going to use an ultrasonic cleaner with any type of aluminum suppressor, outer tube, baffles, you're more than likely going to see results like this. And again, as a reminder, this was only after 30 minutes of time running the machine. All right, so last component that we threw in the ultrasonic cleaner is actually this muzzle brake here. And as I'm grabbing it, I could tell that most of the surface residue that had been on it previously, whether it was some what looked like oxidation as a result of copper or just carbon buildup, it was really easy to kind of wipe off just with my fingertips as I was kind of grabbing it here. So I think the ultrasonic cleaner actually did a pretty fantastic job on just that alone. I don't know that there are going to be very many people who are going to want to remove a muzzle device from their long gun, but I think another way to look at this would have been if we had decided to use a piston or a booster, depending on, that being a stainless steel finish, by and large, that'll come out looking pretty nice. So it's the ultrasonic cleaner results. One last observation too, if you guys at home take a look at the chop towel, obviously there was still a little bit of carbon that we could easily brush off after having submitted it to the ultrasonic cleaner. So, one of those things to keep in mind. Let's move on to the next one. Another cleaning method here, we're gonna see what the end results are here, are with our wet tumbler. So if you guys remember, this was essentially just stainless steel beads, a little bit of water with dishwashing soap. So it should be pretty interesting to see what kind of results we got with these guys here. And again, we let this run for what, 2-3 hours? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ooh. Oh, that's kind of neat. Huh. So there's an octane tube right there. And I mean, at a glance, it looks like that outer tube hasn't really been damaged in terms of finish.
Definitely want to make sure you get all the media out too.
Yeah. I don't know, as you're looking at that, what do you think? What's your first impression?
The outside finish looks actually pretty decent for how old of a can it was.
This is dated 2014, guys.
But the more important part is the baffles, of course, which still have slight carbon residue.
That is pretty interesting.
Switchback tube.
Okay. And the switchback tube is raw titanium. We didn't do a coating on that tubing, primarily because we wanted to make sure that you guys at home, if you're going to service that suppressor, as you should, it makes it much easier for you to maintain.
Your switchback baffles are actually looking pretty clean.
Pretty good.
Oh, now that's interesting with the muzzle device.
Wow.
That's probably the biggest difference is the muzzle device. It's actually starting to slightly pull some of your oxidized finish off, so it basically polished the oxidize off. Once again though, I mean this, with lead, unless it is like a fine powder or that lead acetate, it won't absorb through the skin.
So we gotten everything wiped down, gotten a pretty good idea of how everything looks, and I mean, Beaver and I are sitting here looking at this and we're thinking, yeah, it's done a great job, but there are still aspects that, I mean, need to be taken into consideration. Like, I mean, as you look at this Beaver, what do you think?
I think it's interesting how once again we're looking at the shoulder on the rims of these tubes, and they're pretty beat up. Threads are still usable, but I wouldn't be too happy if that was my tube. And then with the nitride finish, it went from, you know, a jet black to kind of a gray hue. So it started taking off the nitride finish. Same with the aluminum tube. You can see there's actually a lot of raw aluminum showing on the edges, which isn't good. And we've also found that the media was getting caught up in most of the baffles and the parts.
Including even the muzzle brake here. We found media caught in between the coarse threads and, I mean, just behind the shoulder there. And the other thing I noticed, one of these baffles here, it's a prime example. So this baffle in particular on the switchback was one that was in serious need of cleaning, and that tumbler did a good job of actually doing some damage to that dirt and carbon and everything else, the fouling, but there's still a significant amount there that you'd have to hand scrub out more than likely. So,
and the internals they're almost shielded from the media actually, like, moving around. So I would guess that, yeah, anything that has a surface like crust of carbon, it'll work pretty decent.
We've got one more here to show you, also a tumbler that happened to be a dry tumbler where the media was basically crushed walnut. So let's go ahead and pull that out and see what how those cans turned out. All right, guys, this is actually the dry tumbler that we used I guess fine granules of ground up walnut as the media in this tumbler here. So we're gonna go check out how these, I think we just threw in some baffles and a tube. Yeah, so it should be it. So this is the first time I've seen this, so I'm kind of curious to see what the end results are. Or you might be surprised.
Tiny carbon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be a nightmare.
Oh yeah.
Stuck in the tool marks of the front cap.
So you got most of the baffles out, front cap, the octane tube itself, which, this is interesting. It really just looks dusty. Everything just looks dusty right now. So, I mean, as we look at this, you know, initial thoughts, really not really all that effective. We've got what looks like media because it is fairly fine. These granules are small enough where they're getting in all the little nooks and crannies that you wouldn't want them to be. If you're thinking or hoping that this might be somewhat of a time saver, you may find yourself unpleasantly surprised and having to do some of the tedious work that you didn't expect you'd have to do in order to get the media out of, you know, components like the front cap on the octane or on the coarse thread or in the coarse thread of the that muzzle device there. And as we look at the actual baffle sections out of that octane, it did a decent job of...
It polished the outer spacer, but as far as the carbon goes, it's still pretty solid. Try wiping it down with some solvent, see if that does anything. And no.
Nothing. So, and then the interior,
So you're still going to be working with a brush or a pick to break that carbon off.
So I think of all the different methods we've seen so far, this is probably the least effective that we've run. So that's good to know. Do you think it would have made a difference if we'd used a different media, or is that even possible to use in some?
They have different medias, but this wasn't really designed as, I mean, the wet tumble makes more sense with how hard the steel media is, whereas this is pretty soft stuff, and it allows the carbon to remain.
Yeah.
It's not really going to pick at it.
And period of time, I mean, this was running for what, 3 hours?
3 hours.
Yeah, and it didn't really, you just wasted 3 hours getting results that are unsatisfactory versus everything else that we've seen so far.
Yeah. And I mean, once again, this isn't really something that is is designed for carbon buildup. Like on baffles, it's mainly just for brass use, polishing brass.
Which is what it looks like it wanted to do. Yeah. I mean, it looks kind of brassy to me, you know? Yeah. So, all right, hey guys, so we're back. We waited a 24-hour period just to make sure there was enough time for the dip solution to do its thing. So we wanted to come back and show you what the end results are gonna be here. So let's go ahead and pull this beaver and see what happens. So as a reminder to you guys at home, we actually used a Warlock and we used an octane. So we've got two different types of materials that we're soaking overnight to kind of show you the differences in terms of materials and the results that this dip will have.
Ultimately, what we're doing is we're putting it in the water and then we're going to wipe it down with a rag. So either way, it's going to dilute and dry off. And then afterwards, I mean, at that point, there's hardly nothing left, and you can wipe it down with a solvent or whatever you'd use to clean your firearms with. They're definitely clean. One thing to note is we are currently using 7075 aluminum with an anodized finish, and one of the things that we found through testing is the anodized can protect it from the dip, but we still don't recommend it, mainly because if there is any sort of compromise to the finish, it'll start to pit where it's compromised and it'll eat the aluminum from underneath the anodize. Serial number is still fine. So the actual engraving didn't go deep enough into the anodize for it to actually affect the aluminum underneath.
Sounds good. So we're lucky with this one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from all appearances right now, just based on what we're seeing with this Warlock 2, which again is an aluminum suppressor, aluminum tube, aluminum baffles, the results here are pretty atypical. Not something that we would expect to see normally, and definitely not in line with what we've seen in previous tests here. So again, because it is so atypical, we wouldn't recommend using this for any aluminum skinned can or handle baffles.
This is a sample set of one. We've done multiple tests where we've compromised the anodize or the aluminum. And just through rough fire, you can actually see where some of the anodize is starting to discolor and flake off, but it still hasn't been able to penetrate all the way through. You've got a clear coat of anodize there. But overall, it's definitely clean. Within the recommended manufacturer's use, because obviously we won't speak for other companies, and we don't really know exactly what their materials or their processes are. I would still say stay away from aluminum, stay away from serialized components. But as far as any steel with the baffles especially, I would clean steel baffles in this all day.
I know talking offline too, we mentioned even titanium components and any potential there.
Yeah, as far as titanium and even some of the different finishes go, there's still a lot to learn. We're actually going to find out what happens to nitride with this flash hider that's sitting in this other dip solution with the steel parts. So,
for you guys at home, one of the things that you definitely didn't catch is off camera some of the gases emanating from this particular jar right here pressurized the container enough where it actually popped the lid quite a bit, and it might have surprised some of the guys on set. So it's too bad we didn't get that on camera.
Yeah. Wouldn't recommend pranking your friends with dip.
No. So one thing of note here too, as you look at these containers, one actually has somewhat of smoky blue, and the other is almost like it's kind of like an aqua blue type finish. I don't know what you'd call that. What do you think?
Yeah, like a dark cayenne.
Yeah, and that darker hue is a direct result of what, copper, you think?
Yeah, that would be my guess. There's definitely going to be more copper, especially that came off the flash hider. And the flash hider actually did have a longer chemical reaction than the baffles did. It did have more carbon buildup, but it was also used in a torture test with 5.56, so you're going to see a lot of copper coming off of it. Yeah, and once again, I mean, this is all carbon. You're not going to have as much lead buildup. We didn't shoot any lead cast bullets through this. So most of what you're seeing as far as residue is the carbon buildup. But it surprisingly did work pretty well on that flash hider.
Yeah. I would consider doing this for pistons with carbon buildup, maybe some other residue. Can't really do very much harm there.
That's actually wiping right off too. So.
There's something to be said for that right there.
Yeah, it turned it into kind of a grease.
So this dip is just a simple combination. It's basically a 50-50 split, hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. And then these are just being poured right into or placed in a Tupperware container, just
Water. Yeah. Try to dilute it. Wipe off as much of that residue that you can. Of course, wear gloves and safety goggles or glasses. I mean, to each their own. Obviously, I wouldn't go with the dry tumble. We've seen that that's a waste of time. With the still tumble in the water, we've seen that it can cause rolling in the threads. So anything that's sharp, it's going to try to roll over. The soda blast is, I mean, you do have to buy the equipment, and you do have to, of course, make sure that you have it all installed properly, and you have to deal with the media. Each of the cleaning methods kind of have pros and cons. So you got a headache with the dip. I wouldn't really want to mess around with the chemicals personally. So I'm prone to use the blast and then just take it with a brush and a pick.
Yeah, I mean, as me personally, as somebody who doesn't really like to clean, period, out of everything that I've seen, the different methods that we used, I would consider more than likely the wet tumble, using steel for media. I would more than likely not throw any outer tubes in there, just because I wouldn't want to mar the finish or the threads. But I wouldn't take issue with throwing pistons and or baffles, stainless steel baffles in that. And of course, used in combination with just a little bit of handwork, with a wire brush and pick, will get you there, I think. Just seems the most efficient and most effective way to be able to do it. This would be fine, but then I wouldn't want to have to contend and deal with having to dispose of, an acid-based type chemical like that. It's just not one of those things anybody would want to have to deal with. So probably steer clear of that too. But overall, I mean, the results are kind of surprising. Didn't expect to see what we saw using all these different methods. And as is always the case, try to make sure that you adhere to manufacturer recommended cleaning intervals and techniques, while also making sure that you properly utilize the suppressors according to manufacturer's recommendations too. So hopefully this was educational for you guys. It certainly was for us, despite the fact that we've done this testing just not in line like this consecutively,
right.
Using the same components. So once again, thanks for watching, you guys. I'm Dewey with SilencerCo. This is Beaver with SilencerCo, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate your support for the company and the industry as a whole. Thanks. Take care.